Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone. A very big warm welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK, and our show today is the Listening Mentor. We've got a very interesting topic. It is when life is challenging, it's hard to listen. Have you ever been going through something and somebody came to you to share something and you just had a very hard time even staying focused? We're going to get to the bottom of this with the star of our show, who is also a certified therapist. She's known as the Harley Street Stress Expert, joining us from the United Kingdom. Let's welcome Caroline.heward. Hello.
Woo-hoo, hello.
Woo. Nice to see you. How are you today?
Always lovely to see you too, Dr. JACALYN. I love these shows. We do go deep on these shows.
We sure do. It's kind of therapeutic, and it's also very educational because the topics that we discuss are really relevant. And let's be honest, people would be paying you to come discuss these topics.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for your time. Would you mind giving a little bit of a background about Harley Street and about the work that you do?
Yes, of course. Well, I decided when I became a therapist to work from a proper address. So I had to get credentialized, and all my credentials were literally poured over by the medical board at the Harley Street practice before I could even get in. And I thought, if I'm going to become a therapist, I want to be seen to be at a proper qualified address. And Harley Street in London is the address, it is the street where all the good doctors and therapists are. So that's the reason behind that. And I've been with them for 17 years, and I literally have moved away from London in the last 12 months And so I've had to relinquish my contract with them. But I essentially have been with them for so long that I felt that I can actually call myself the Harley Street stress expert, because I was the Harley Street expert in terms of being there for so long, even before social media. What do? I literally help people bust their stress. I help them literally break through the blueprint of the root causes, the patterns that keep repeating in their everyday life, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or behavioral, whether it's a relationship issue that keeps coming up, whether it's a bereavement issue, whether it's anger management, whether it's a physical ache and pain that you constantly get, or if it's anxiety, depression, or that general stress that causes you a lack of sleep. And essentially, you will feel incredibly relaxed and have a very deep, relaxed and replenishing sleep, so that when you wake up, you will feel amazing. And that's because there's a little magic in my consultations. So I look forward to helping you bust your stress.
Oh, it sounds so rewarding. I could go to sleep right now. No, I'm kidding.
We have a show to do here. We have
That's
some
what you
meeting things to
do. The day's just beginning. No, it's the middle of the day. But so I want to get into the topic because I think it's really difficult. Obviously, there are ebbs and flows in our lives, and we go through different things at different periods of time. And that doesn't mean, well, I'm going through something, you're going through something else, and maybe you're more open and I'm more closed off. And I think that's what makes it really challenging, because as humans, I feel that our emotions dictate a lot of the way that we act and react. But when we take the time and we know we have the tools, there's plenty of tools. This is a tool right now. The show is a tool, the YouTube, all the social media sites, the podcast, there are plenty of tools. It's about taking what you're watching and reading and learning and actually implementing it. But my point is, we're not always on the same page at the same time. So that's, I think, the rub of it, if you would.
Absolutely, because we're not, and we are at different states of beingness. So I can be really stressed because my accounts has a deadline, and you might be really stressed because you have a broadcasting deadline and you've got to get everybody together. Different types of stress at the same time, different meanings, because yours will be the daily broadcast, mine will be like the end of year, that everything has to be done, which is a legal thing. And as soon as it becomes a legal thing, it all gets very, very tense. And I certainly felt that when I was selling my property and buying a property, there was so much legalese and jargon that I had to get through to understand what it actually was that I had to do and what was needed. And I used to get very panicky, and I still do every time I get an email from my accountant. I always feel dread because it's a legal thing. But if I get an email from you, I don't feel like that. I feel, oh, right, now it's time to do another show. And I think that's the thing. There's different levels of stress depending on what it is that you are having to accomplish. And nobody stresses any less than anyone else's, because it's always urgent and important and emotional to whoever it is that's suffering that stress. So there is no one person that's got more stress than another. It's actually how we respond and react.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Thank you, Caroline. Something I've noticed also, because, just like you, we're in the public domain, a lot of people reach out, you have conversations, and I notice there are times when people will just continuously interrupt me. I can't even get a word out and they just keep interrupting. So I just eventually stop and say, what's coming up for you? What did you want to accomplish by having this call or this Zoom meeting? And many times it's a lot of like nervous, talking really fast. There's something going on at the core of it. But if you're not someone who's trained to see that, it can be a lot of tense head-butting situations for people who don't have listening skills like we have. So how can we provide value to people who are looking to have some peace in their lives and have some better quality of relationships?
Well, it's a really good question. I'd like to share with you, if I may, something that happened today. And it's really about setting good boundaries. And I had somebody try to call me a couple of times on Instagram, and I'd never had a call before on Instagram. And essentially, I thought, well, this may be important. This person might be really, really stressed, and they need my help. And so I kind of stopped what I was doing and I answered the call. And in a very drawled accent, he said, "I really like to get to know you, and I really like your profile." And it was very drawled. And I said, "How can I help you? Is there anything specific you would like my help with?" And he said, "I love your posts and I really, really want to get to know you." And I said, "Well, I'm very public because I'm a stress therapist. So are you suffering any type of stress?" And he says, "No, I just want to get to know you. I'd like to be friends with you. Can you give me your WhatsApp number? Can you give me this number?" And I kind of turned around and I very, very clearly said, I use my social media platforms for my business. I says, "This is not a dating site to me." And he says, "Oh, ma'am," he said, "I really, really would like to get to know you." He said, "Let's get on WhatsApp and let's chat." And he just wasn't listening. And I said, "Look, I'm being very polite here. And now I'm going to be very firm. I'm here on the social media platforms from a business perspective. Is there any stress that you would like to resolve?" He says, "No, ma'am, I'd just like to get to know you." And I said, "Well, I'm going to end this call now because clearly you're thinking this is a dating site." And I ended the call and it was about 3 minutes long. I've got to get a bit quicker. But essentially, I'm actually very exposed to those kinds of calls, and I have to set good boundaries. Otherwise, I could have been going backwards and forwards for some time. So it's about knowing what your objective is in terms of your communication, and then getting quickly to the nub of what somebody wants so that you can actually be of more help, not just to that person, but to the other people that are in the chain of wanting to speak to you and connect with you.
I really commend you for that, because that could have taken up an hour of your time or more if you just went back and forth, back and forth. And so you were direct and you had your boundaries, and sayonara. So the person was, I guess the expression is, swimming in the wrong lane. I don't know. But yeah, so I really like that. Something else I wanted to talk about is, I recently had a conversation with someone. It was a very refreshing conversation because the person is very direct. And in a world where we're constantly talking about being nice and being supportive, many times we're also dancing around what it is that really needs to be addressed, that elephant in the middle of the room. What are your thoughts about not only being a yes person? When it comes to being a yes person, I mean, if it's possible to do it, say yes. But if it's crossing boundaries, if it's something that you're not in agreement with, how do you feel about being very direct?
It's difficult because I'm British. As English, we're a very polite nation, but quite like the Canadians, very, very polite, and find it difficult to get into a conflict situation. So I will say that there are different cultures and nationalities that aren't that polite. From a Britishness perspective, we find it very difficult to say no. I've trained for many, many years with a lot of Americans, and even though I can be extremely direct, I still find it difficult to enter into a place of uncomfortable conflict. And I say that genuinely, uncomfortable conflict, where there's two sides to the story and the other person really needs you and you don't know how to let them down gently. And so sometimes being direct is the only way. So I feel that it's important because you can waste a lot of time by not being direct and saying, "No, this is not for me." But the simple way to do it is literally that, to say, "Thank you very much for sharing this idea or this opportunity. At the moment, this is not for me. And I really do appreciate you sharing it with me." And from that perspective, you've been respectful to the other person, you've demonstrated appreciation, and you've also said no in a really polite way. And if it's really not for you, and something that they're very excited about and very keen about you getting involved, then it's important for you to say, this sounds like an exciting project for you. It doesn't really fit with what I do, and I really appreciate you suggesting me having a look at this. So it's about being respectful at the same time as honouring your own boundaries. Always say thank you, because you never know when that person might come back and suggest something that will really, really work for you. So always be polite and be respectful of the other person, because they're very excited. They really want you to be involved. It just might not be right for you for all sorts of reasons. But it is important to say thank you, because you never know what might be around the corner from that same person or from somebody in their community or circle.
That's so true. I'm glad you brought up about the community, because we're all interrelated or connected in some way, that old 6 degrees of separation. And I've had recently actually 2 situations where people were in my life and they weren't in my life, and I think they're going to be back in my life, which is kind of exciting. So I always feel that the door is open if there's a way to communicate through whatever the issues are. And I think that's also part of listening skills, is that whatever judgment that we've had about someone in the past, if there's an opportunity for you to do something together and you have some interest in it, you've got to be able to put that judgment aside. But there's also an expression, and I hope I get it right: fool me once, something, fool me twice, or hit me in the head. I don't remember what it is, but
I know the cliche, and I can't think of it. I think it's fool me once, fool me twice, fool me 3 times, and then it's like a bad thing. But I can't remember.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the is. But yes, it's essentially, you can fool me the first time and the second time, and that's, but if you do it the third time, then there's a problem here.
Very true. What are your thoughts about calling people out when they're not listening to? Because I've found myself doing this recently. I'll let the person continuously interrupt, and finally I'll say, I just wanted to bring to your attention, because I'm not sure if you're aware of it, how often you're interrupting me. And this particular person said, I do. I know I keep interrupting you. I can't stop myself. And I said, well, maybe take some quiet time and think about what's coming up for you when I'm speaking. There's something about what I'm saying that your reaction is to interrupt.
That's really good. That's a nice call. And it's not easy to do that, but when you do, it makes the other person step into a state of awareness, because if they just keep going on and on, they're doing it as a habit, as a behavior. And when you're calling them out, it actually brings that awareness to their behavior to them. So that's what she said, yes, I realize I'm doing it and still carrying on. But what you did was you actually pattern interrupted their interruptions, and you actually made them stop. And it's almost like a startling thing. And then, then they carry on because it's difficult to stop. But then after that conversation, they will contemplate about it. They will acknowledge the fact that they do interrupt, and they will start to integrate what came up for them. And that is, what we call as a therapist a pattern interrupt. And it's important to say it at the time that they do it, so that when they become aware of it, then they can start to work out what's making them and do that. And from my perspective, it could be many reasons. And it also could be the fact that they don't feel heard themselves. So they're trying to get all their words out because they're obviously under pressure, because they don't feel generally that they are listened to or heard in their normal family or relationship or work environment.
That's a really good point. That's great insight. Something else I wanted to ask you about this particular situation is, I've also heard, because we have the TV show and I have books on listening and courses on listening, someone, actually 2 people, have said to me, I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking, but now I'm going to tell you what I think. And what's interesting to me, the first thing that comes to mind is that while I was speaking, they weren't listening to anything I was saying because they couldn't wait till I stopped speaking so they could give their opinion about something.
Yes, that's absolutely true. It's totally true. It sounds bizarre, but when you're waiting for a pause, and that's what it is, that they're literally waiting for you to stop, and all that's in their mind is to get out what they want to say. And so in that space of you saying what you're saying, they're not listening because their mind and their thoughts is full of the point that they want to make. And you will see it because they'll be going, they'll be almost like wanting to interrupt. And at the same time, you will feel it. You will feel that there's something itching that they want to say. And I've actually called some people out saying things like, you want to say something? What did you want to say? Before I've carried on, because it was clear to me that they weren't listening. And sometimes it's easier to give the platform and the opportunity for the person to say what's on their mind and to allow them the space to get it out so that then you can continue. And hopefully, and I say this very honestly, hopefully they might continue to listen to you rather than itching to get what they want to say out.
I'm just thinking about what you're saying. Yeah. So while the conversation's taking place, and because of the fact that there are habits and patterns, and if it's not a stranger, it's someone you know, and you could almost anticipate how it's going to go. It's almost like if you have a tennis match between two people who have played against each other, you pretty much the game where how do you disrupt that game of the back and forth without threatening the other person? And I'll give an example. I'm just going to use a tennis example. So if I were a top tennis player and I was playing you and you're a top tennis player and I know your game and you know my game, I might hire a top coach who knows your game and knows my game to give me some tips and pointers on maybe, instead of the backhand, I'm going to hit to the forehand or whatever it's going to be. And it could be the same thing with this by bringing in a coach or a mentor, but it could be very threatening to the other person.
Yes, I'm just pausing on that because yes, it could be. It depends on what state of mind that they are in. And if they're on the defensive to begin with. And I did kind of take a breath and a pause when you said it, because if the person is on the defensive, then they will feel threatened. If they're simply in that conversation, that backwards forwards conversation, I call it the tennis match, when you've got something to say, that's where we are really. We're in a little tennis match, yeah. Which you have something to say, I have something to say, and we're smiling and we've got our feedback and our things that we're saying, and it's a nice tennis match. It feels good. But there are some tennis matches that you're in that it doesn't feel good, and it feels anticipatory, it feels complicated, and it feels like you're trying to get your space or to be heard or to feel that you're actually being heard, because people will know that they're not being heard, and they will, if they've got their own insecurities, they will come up in that conversation. So it is important to be aware of how the other person is showing up, and it's not necessarily what they say, it's how they behave, how they respond or not respond, how they look at you, how they interact with you. Obviously, we're on a screen, so it's very difficult to look into each other's eyes and smile, but it's very obvious that we are connected in a conversation, and the person that's feeling threatened will feel a disconnection, and they will be turning away from you, having gestures of crossed arms or crossed legs. And it just depends how threatened they feel. And if they do feel threatened, you will feel that. And so it's important for you to acknowledge that and open it up again so that they feel comfortable to express, and then the conversation becomes more exploring. And it's not your stuff, it's theirs. It's when they're behaving in this conflict situation and you're not in conflict and you're trying to work out, it's very difficult, but you will feel that the other person's in conflict. And so when you're in that conversation, it's important to acknowledge, because it'll be energetic, you will feel it from them without them saying anything, because 80% of our communication is nonverbal.
And I've had some, every time we are together, a great conversation with you. And to your point, we are here on television doing a show, but this is real. We don't have a script, and we are digging deep for pretty much all the shows that we do together. And yet when people are in a personal relationship, for example, which I think that's a very different communication share than when it's business, I feel like a few things. The first thing that's coming up is when someone's consistently interrupting. I know, let's say someone's consistently interrupting me. I don't really want to share anymore because it's so much work and it's so stressful. So I can't even get a few sentences out without you interrupting me. So I'm not going to tell you anymore. I'm going to go to tell someone else who is a good listener. That's the first thing. And I think the second thing is when life is challenging and people's attention span is short, they feel anxious and they want to just shut you up so that they can give the solution that they think you need. But they don't really know what you need because they're not even listening. So I think in a relationship, that those two things alone can be something that can really pull people apart. There can be a lot of anger and resentment, and it shows up in your health, and then they're coming to see you.
Sometimes, and that's all of those things are so true, and you don't know what's going on in the other person's world. You're not aware of their thoughts and you're not sure about where they're coming from. So it's, when that happens and you know that they're interrupting, it's important just to stop and to listen, and to listen to them, to allow them the space to say. And maybe they don't want the solution, or maybe they don't want you to say anything. And sometimes it's very easy to jump in to offer a solution, because people generally don't like to see anyone suffer. That there is a general thing about, in terms of when somebody comes up and they're in an ache or a pain, or they're suffering with a relationship issue, that they're coming to say something to you because they're looking for a solution. They're looking for something to feel better. That sometimes all they need to do is just to say what they need to say. And it might be that they're not looking for a solution. I frequently had calls from people that literally only want to say, they want to download, and then they feel better. They feel calmer and easier and more relaxed because they've just literally let all the words out they needed to say. And it is a judgment. It is a judgment game of knowing whether the person needs something from you, or whether the person is looking for a solution, or indeed whether they just literally want to say all the words and know that somebody is there for them and listening. And it is a juggling act, because we don't know, because we're always responding and reacting in different ways to different situations. And the situation of their stress may be nothing to do with you, and yet you're feeling it and almost feeling a responsibility to help them where you don't actually need to. All they needed to do was say everything that was on their mind.
So, Caroline, in your experience, when you have personal relationships, like let's say it's a family relationship, even because you are family, sometimes it could feel like you don't have anywhere to go because it's your family and you're related, but yet there's this tension and you communicate in different ways. So then you maybe just decide to not communicate. That happens, right?
Yes, yeah. Sometimes it's easier to and just literally say nothing, because the families, particularly when you're in a family situation, they all know how to press your buttons. They all know, because they know each other so well, they all know the different behaviors and the different words and things that can make you feel uncomfortable, that will literally press your button. So it's important sometimes in a family situation to almost, I remember somebody saying to me to pick your arguments and to pick your times that you will want to state your point. And there are times that you don't need to say anything. You just need to listen. And if you don't agree with it, sometimes you don't even need to say. Sometimes the other person just needs to offload, download, whatever it is, if they're feeling angry, because it might not be anything to do with you. But families do know how and what to say to touch your buttons. And there might be something going on in their lives that's nothing to do with you, and yet you're what I would call copping out because you're the closest to them. You're the closest to them in terms of being the one that they can literally transfer their stuff, their stress onto you. So it's important to know that and to feel comfortable with staying quiet so that you don't literally go into this tennis match that's full of conflict.
And Caroline, in your experience, we talked about this, I call it the silent treatment, but going silent and not engaging is a choice. That's an option. And for me, many times I like that option. I don't want the confrontation. But in speaking to people who are direct, because I know Americans are direct, some people don't choose that route. They choose to go head on and just say, by the way, I just want to let you know X, Y, and Z. And I don't like that approach in some cases, because if you know the opposite entity, the other person, and you know their personality, they might not have the interest, the ability to embrace what you're saying and take action. It's one thing, we can just talk all day long, but if we don't take action, so to have a confrontation and then there's that awkwardness that's sitting there that maybe you're never going to get past, and the person's not changing what they're doing anyway, doesn't seem like a great path to take. But if it is a situation where it's not necessarily a family member, when is it time? And I've asked you this before, but I think it warrants being repeated. When is it time when you say to yourself, this relationship is not working? It is more aggravation and more pain and more discourse than the upside.
It's a really good analogy. And I've actually done that with friendships when things are not working. And it's sort of what I call time. If there's more confrontation and more angst when you're in that relationship, whether it's a friendship with the same sex or opposite sex, whether you're in an intimate relationship, it's about, what is it that you're gaining from that consistent anxiety of being in that confrontational conflicts communication with the other person, and is it worth it? And this is how we'll end up in relationships with narcissists, where there's the narcissist and the victim. There will always be, for a narcissist, there'll always that's a persecutor, he will always find, or she will always find, somebody that's a victim. And that relationship is it's played out time and time again. And so there are those kinds of relationships, and they certainly are in the workplace as well. There's a lot of narcissists in the professional circles in terms of the hierarchies, like the bankers and the people that have very, very prominent positions, the politicians, for instance, because they have to be very direct and forthright and controlling, and they will have an agenda. And so there will be some challenges with being in personal relationships, whether they be friendships with business colleagues or intimate relationships. And so the person doesn't change, that they are the same, whether they're in their work situation, whether they're in their friendships or their personal situation in terms of their families and their intimate relationships. We are the same person. We don't put on a new suit and become somebody different. The behaviors follow through. And if you are in that kind of situation, you have to decide whether it's right for you, whether you want to stay in that confrontational relationship, whether it is from a personal situation or from a business situation, and whether you want to be in that, sort of, I call it walking on eggshells, where you're always gently, not knowing what to say, when to say, and in fear of the other person's reaction. There has to be a time that you decide not to be there anymore and not to be in that confrontational situation. And only you can decide, and it all comes down to boundaries.
Boundaries it is. And I think once we set our boundaries, maybe the people we interact with are different. Maybe we're attracting something new.
Well, whatever is a discomfort for us, so whatever is unresolved in ourselves, I know this is going pretty deep now, it mirrors in terms of our interactions and our relationships. So if we're feeling insecure and unconfident, that will show up in the people that interact with us, that they will feel that they can walk all over your boundaries. And it's okay to call them out. And what that will do is that will strengthen your boundaries. And only when you notice it and when you call it out and say, this is not okay, I'm not accepting this behavior, I'm not happy in this relationship. And it could be that you're in a narcissistic relationship in your work. And there are many people that are in those situations. I've certainly had situations where I've had narcissistic bosses, and it's very uncomfortable because they prey on you being vulnerable and needing your job and needing your salary to come in every month. And so some people love that and take the control to another place. And I've certainly been in those situations within my corporate life and my management life, because I've always been the person that gets results. And that can be, that can bring on a lot of jealousy in other people when they don't get the results, or they expect you to fall over. Some people don't like you to succeed. And when that comes up and you do succeed, that makes other people, well, they make it about themselves. They make it feel like they're not succeeding or they're not good enough. And so out of this kind of behavior, it's actually coming out of jealousy. And so there's all sorts of things. And I've had a number of people say, when I've explained a situation within my corporate life, when I've described it, they've said, that person's jealous of you. And you don't normally see it yourself because you're in it. But when you're describing the situation to someone on the outside of what's going on, it's very easy to see that there's a jealousy situation and they're trying to make you feel insignificant so that they feel significant.
The old jealousy rears its head again. Caroline, you have been here today with me talking about when life is challenging, what happens to our listening skills, and many times they go right out the window. But what we do know on a positive note is that we have an opportunity every single day to grow, to be curious, to learn, and no one can do it for us. So we can help ourselves. And when we can't help ourselves, there's professionals out there like you. So tell our audience, I know you have an insanely, ridiculously priced special that you're offering right now. But for people who are out there watching or listening and they want to hire you, they want to work with you, what does that entail?
Thank you, Dr. JACALYN. I can't believe we're where we are in terms of the time of the show. It's gone so fast. But one of my promoters that I've been working with for a long time, he would always turn around and say, Caroline, you're deep. And that's what I do. I help people go to a place they wouldn't normally go to in an everyday way. Rather than just telling your story, I will look underneath. It's almost like sort of opening the car hood and looking underneath what's going on. And it's about sort of the symptom is over here, the problem is here, and I will take you all the way and look at what's causing the experiences that you're experiencing, whether they be physical, emotional, mental, or behavioral. My insane offer is you can book me for an introductory 1-hour session. And it's insanely priced, and it is an introductory session. Your first hour is going to be £50 British. It's ridiculous. It's so silly. It's unbelievable. And I would love you to take advantage of it, because it's not going to be there forever. And we will look at 3 symptoms, because other things will come up. As you can see, we look at one thing and then other things come up. And if you want to do more work with me, which is I'm sure that you will, then we can look at packages. And I offer a month's program and a 3-month program. And if you want to work with me longer, a 6-month program. And we can budget that to your budget. I look forward to helping you break through the patterns that are keeping you suffering, so that you live a more peaceful, relaxed life, and you have a better relationship with others and obviously with yourself.
I love it. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here and for adding so many wonderful, poignant comments about life being challenging and what we can do to be better listeners. This is the Listening Mentor Show on USA Global TV and Radio. And Caroline and I are saying goodbye for now. We'll see you again in just about 2 weeks, I guess, right?
Yes, I think it is. Yes, we are. Yes.
All right. Fantastic. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. This program has been brought to you in part by Zane Carson Carruth, etiquette and protocol expert, international award-winning author, television show host, and philanthropist. Thank you to Zane, our official diamond sponsor for USA Global TV and Radio in partnership with E360 TV. Zane is the author of the world's first tooth fairy ever, as well as many other children's books. She's also the television host of Elegance, Polished Demeanor, and Posh Living, seen on USA Global TV and Radio.
Hi, my name is Zane Carson Carruth, and I'm the author of this book, The World's First Tooth Fairy Ever.
Reading is magic. Studies have shown that reading to your children lays the foundation for greater success in life. Reading helps develop language and vocabulary skills. It helps improve memory, and it encourages curiosity and inspires creativity. The benefits are immeasurable, and as a parent, you'll benefit too. In only 10 or 15 minutes a day, you'll be creating warm memories and a bonding experience that will last for years to come. So take time to read to your children. Read them books about things that engage and interest them. Tales of fairies and magic fascinate children, and as everyone knows, the Tooth Fairy is at the top of the list. If your child loves magic, wands, adventure, and what child doesn't, you'll love reading them books from the trademarked series, The World's First Tooth Fairy Ever. Follow along as Abella, the world's first tooth fairy, accidentally starts the tooth fairy tradition. Learn the tricks of being a professional tooth fairy in the book, Abella Starts a Tooth Fairy School. Your child's imagination will soar as you read the adventures of Abella and her magic wand. These wonderful books are available at worldsfirsttoothfairy.com and at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Walmart.
To learn more about Zane, contact her through her website, zanecarruth.com, ZaneCarruth.com. Order Zane's books and merchandise. Contact her about being a keynote speaker at your next event.